All right, let's get underway. Everybody open your Bibles to Job chapter 11. We're going to spend a little bit of time in the book of Job because it is a very important work. Struggles with the age-old question. First of all, do bad things happen to good people? I mean, there were some who said, no, bad things don't happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. So if bad things are happening to you, you must have done something wrong. And that's a part of the argument in the book of Job. Job, if all these terrible things have happened to you, you must have done something wrong. But then the question is, okay, if Job really was a good man, and God is quoted as saying he was, and all these terrible things happen to him, no question that they are terrible things, then why do bad things happen to good people? What meaning do we find here? And I've told you that some scholars believe that the book of Job is perhaps the work of several different authors. That after the first author sort of raised the argument here, that as succeeding generations dealt with the scroll, they may have added their own arguments, because you have the three comforters, they're called comforters, who come to Job, and they don't just speak one time, they speak again and again and again. They take turns, and each time he responds to them. And so perhaps you have one author sort of giving his take on it, and then you may have another author and another author. We cannot be positive about that. The Hebrew words that are used are different a little bit, reflecting perhaps a different century, but not enough that scholars have ever been able to pin that down. We cannot be for sure. We know it was the scroll itself was handled one more time by somebody who added a prose postscript to it, and we'll come to that later. So the beginning of the book is in prose, and then you get to poetry, and it ends with prose as well. We were at chapter 11 is where I marked last time. So we're not going to spend months on Job, but we may spend as many as 4 weeks. We've done 1 week. I'm thinking that it may take us about a week to deal with 10 chapters. So we're going to go much faster than we did the last time we went through. And you'll need a Bible in front of you. It will help you greatly if you have it in front of you, because I'm going to be skipping. I've read carefully again myself, and I think there are parts of it that are redundant for sure, and we can weed out some parts and still get the argument that each one is making here. Let's pray. God, when we talk about parts of your book that are easy for us, those parts do not include Job. Job is difficult for us because there is no definitive answer in Job, as you well know. And we don't have a good answer for that question of why bad things happen to good people. But we know that others who were people of faith have taken an opportunity to write their very best thoughts on this matter, and we want to hear them and then struggle ourselves with this age-old question of why bad things happen to some really good people. We offer our best effort in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Chapter 11. We've just had another fairly long speech by Job, and so one of the three responds, and this one is Zophar. Zophar answered, "Should a multitude of words go unanswered?" In other words, Job's been going on and on and on as written here. And so he says, we can't let all those words go unanswered, so I've got to speak to this. Should a multitude of words go unanswered? Should one full of talk be vindicated? Should your babble put others to silence, and when you mock, shall no one shame you? Now, stop and remember. These three are called friends of Job. They're sometimes called comforters of Job. And I told you that when they first arrived, they did the right thing. Remember? When they first arrived, they did the right thing. They just sat down beside him and sat there. They didn't say anything. No easy answers, no arguments, didn't ask any questions. They just sat with him in his grief. They were really, really close to him in his grief. But then, finally, the words begin. And Job's trying to defend himself, and these three are trying to figure out, if Job is as good as we've always believed him to be, how could all these terrible things happen to him? Verse 4, "For you say, my conduct is pure, and I am clean in God's sight. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For wisdom is many-sided. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves." That's a hard statement, huh? I mean, Job's lost all of his possessions, the camels and the donkeys and the sheep and the goats, and then his own children, and now his own health. And this Zophar dares to say, God exacts of you even less than your guilt deserves. So he is accusing Job of something. Can you find out the deep things of God, Job? Can you find out the limit of El Shaddai, the Almighty? It's higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. Remember, Sheol means dampness, darkness, like a cave or a tomb. So higher than heaven, lower than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth, broader than the sea. You know, it says longer than the earth. Of course, they still thought the earth was flat. That one could measure how far from north to south, how far from east and west. They didn't know the earth was round. So longer than the earth and broader, wider than the sea. And the sea to them was the Mediterranean, of course. Okay. Skip to verse 13. "If you direct your heart rightly, you will stretch out your hands toward him," that is God. "If iniquity is in your hand, put it far away, and do not let wickedness reside in your tents. Surely then you will lift up your face without blemish. You will be secure and will not fear. You will forget your misery." Verse 17, "And your life will be brighter than the noonday." Verse 18, "And you will have confidence because there is hope." Verse 19, "You will lie down and no one will make you afraid." Go to chapter 12. "Throw yourself on the mercies of God, Job." That's what Zophar is telling him. Job answered, "No doubt you are the people. That is, you represent the majority here. And wisdom will die with you." I like that. Mr. Smarty Pants, you know so much, I guess when you die, all the wisdom will die with you. "But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? I am a laughingstock to my friends. I who called upon God, and he answered me, a just and blameless man." And God himself said that's who Job was. Chapter 1, a just and blameless man. "I am a laughingstock. Those at ease have contempt for misfortune." Hear that one. We talk a bit today, sometimes read in the papers about compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue. If we know about one person, a child who's in a well, or even 33 miners in a mine in Chile, our mind can grasp that. When we talk about hundreds of thousands of AIDS victims in a country in Africa, we don't quite know how to deal with that. If there's one person, people send in a lot of money. If it's 10 people, they send in money. If it's 33 people, they do everything possible they can to help them. But 1 million people who are in trouble because of a great flood, a tsunami, so on, much more difficult. Even the country of Haiti. Those at ease have contempt for my misfortune. You remember in Scrooge in Christmas Carol, as Dickens portrayed him, when Scrooge is confronted by people who are asking alms of him, Our pledge campaign this year is a farewell to alms. They're asking alms, a few coins for the poor at Christmas time. Are there no more debtors' prisons? He asks. Lock them up. Here Job says, those at ease have contempt for misfortune. Go to verse 7. Ask the animals, they will teach you, the birds of the air, they will tell you, the plants of the earth, they will teach you, the fish of the sea will declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? He's the one who's given life to us all. In His hand is the life of every living thing and the ruach of every human being. Skip to verse 23. He makes nations great, then destroys them. He enlarges nations, then leads them away. Gail and I have been to Florence in Italy several times. It's a wonderful place to go. And we've been there with groups of people, and we've been there just the two of us. And one of the favorite things of most people is to see Michelangelo's magnificent David boy. Really is remarkable to stand there and look at this sculpture, white Carrara marble, chiseled away, so smooth, so beautiful now. All these hundreds of years standing there, so beautiful. But one time, we were listening to a young Italian man who was the guide talking about Michelangelo's work, and he said, there are many who say, this David boy does not look like a Jew. And they are right. He doesn't look like a Jew. David is an Italian boy of Michelangelo's own time. Look at him, he said. He is a Roman. He is a Roman. And today, if Michelangelo were sculpting, he said, he would make an American astronaut. The American astronaut captures the world's imagination. This was a few years ago. Captures the world's imagination. But guess what? As the Roman Empire came and went, so will the United States of America as the leader of the free world. Because you will get lazy. You will ask for more and do less. Your time will come. You ask for more and you do less. Have you been reading about the disruptions in France this week? The French unions have negotiated through the years to the point they only work 35 hours a week. They want a job guaranteed from the time they're 22 until they're 60. And they want to retire at 60 at full pay and live to be 100. Sarkozy and the government are proposing that retirement be raised from 60 to 62. And they're threatening to burn down the town, the city. Great convoys of trucks have been doing what they call l'escargot, the snail. All these trucks pull out onto the freeways of France and go less than 5 miles an hour. And they block every lane. So if they're going less than 5 miles an hour, you will go less than 5 miles an hour. They've just locked down Paris in many ways. Just locked it down. They say, we will work no more than 35 hours a week. We will have guaranteed employment. We will retire at full benefit at age 60 or else. Your time will come. You will get lazy. You will demand more and do less. Demand more and do less. Vote more and more and more benefit to yourself and ask less and less and less of yourself. The people in our group didn't like him. They didn't like him at all. They were eager to get back out on the street and eat some more pasta. Forget that crazy guy. What does he know? That's what he said. And that's what Job said, at least those who wrote this poem for you and me. He makes nations great, then destroys them. He enlarges nations, then leads them away. Assyria came and went. Babylon came and went. Persia came and went. Greece came and went. The Romans came and went. Chapter 13. Job still talking. Look, my eye has seen all this. My ear has heard and understood it. What you know, Zophar, I also know. I'm not inferior to you. But I would speak to El Shaddai, the Almighty. I desire to argue my case with God. As for you, you whitewash with lies. All of you are worthless physicians. You came to comfort me. You came to try to make me well. Go away. That's what he's saying. Go away. Verse 9. Will it be well with you when he searches you out? And this is the idea, if it could happen to somebody else, it could happen to you. I told you when I heard these pastors of the biggest Methodist churches in America go around the table, each one discussing his hurt and pain, his heartache. I flew home and said to Gail, if it could happen to those men, it could happen to me and you. And it did. A heartache, a daughter gone berserk, dead at 31. Yep. Will it go well with you when he searches you out? Look at verse 11. Will not his majesty terrify you and the dread of him fall upon you? Verse 15. See, he will kill me. God, yep, he's going to get me too. I have no hope, but I will defend my ways to his face. I will not go gentle into that good night. I will go kicking and screaming, Job says. Verse 23. How many are my iniquities and my sins? Make me know my transgression and my sin. Why do you hide your face and count me as your enemy? Speaking to God. Look at the words he uses. Of course, it was not written in English, but our scholars have done the best they can to translate accurately. Iniquities, originally from inequity, meaning not equal. How have I not been equal, not fair, if you would? Sins, you see in the very next line, the word transgression is used in a connection with sin. If you look in a big unabridged dictionary, it often gives transgression as the number one definition of sin. Transgression comes from Latin. Trans, something crossing over, or cutting across. In this case, the glissare has to do with cutting across. In this case, cutting across the will of God. One of my professors kept defining sin as unfaith. That the sin was not picking the fruit off the forbidden tree. The sin was not trusting God. Adam and Eve trusted God until the talking snake arrived. And the talking snake translated often as the liar or the deceiver or the accuser. So what a wonderful place you have here. Guess you can eat anything you want. Well, almost. Not quite. That tree over there. God said if we eat off that tree, we'll die. I don't know why God would tell you that, the snake said. The truth is, if you eat off that tree, you'll live as long as God, be as wise as God. Eve said, I think I'll have a bite. How about you, Adam? Yeah, why not? And so Dr. Reinhold Niebuhr, in his big fat book, The Nature and Destiny of Man, talks about children playing on a seesaw. Remember, I've told you that over and over. Children playing on a seesaw. As long as it's in perfect balance, it's a wonderful playground piece of equipment. If you get one child much heavier than the other, it doesn't work at all. It goes boom or boom. And that God created us to be both finite, in some ways like other things created. You know that's true. We have a member of our church in the hospital right now who's had a pig's valve stitched into his heart. We have a man who sang in the choir at 11 o'clock last Sunday, who at Thanksgiving last year had a small beef, a young steer's heart valve stitched into his chest. He sings in the choir on Sunday mornings, 11 months later. Are we like pigs, cows, chimpanzees? Oh yeah, of course. But that we also are created in what the Vulgate call the imago Dei, the image of God. We're sort of like rabbits, but not totally. We're sort of like pigs, but not completely. We're sort of like chimpanzees and great upland gorillas, but not 100%. There's something in humans, this Homo sapien, something that's like God Almighty. And as long as you remember you're both of these things, you are finite. That is, you were made by something else. You had a beginning point and you will have an ending point. In this life you will die. Guaranteed. So if that's all you remember is that you're like rabbits, goats, pigs, cows, eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow you die. But if you do that, then your seesaw goes boom. You've forgotten one very important matter. You're created like God. You're not God, but there's something God-like within every human. Something God-like. And so if we imagine, well, then if we jog far enough and if we eat the right stuff, we can live almost forever. And then something goes wrong even with people. Just see where one of our young swimmers in international competition died of a heart attack yesterday in the pool. Okay. When the world seems to go crazy, when we've done the best we know how, and we still die, still get sick. It troubles us because life's not making complete sense at that point. We're supposed to be able to overcome all these things that threaten us. Faith, unfaith. Faith is trusting that what God created you to be was a good thing. Genesis says it was. About you and me only does it say this was a really good thing, a very good thing when God created humans. As long as they're kept in balance. And only the grace of God can help us do that, to keep that seesaw in balance. Yes, we are both. We are both. We are finite. We will die. We're also created in the very image of God, capable of more than any of the other creatures whom God created. Make me know where I cut across the will of God. My unfaith. Why do you hide your face, he says to God, and count me as your enemy? Chapter 14, we know these words. A mortal, born of woman, few of days, and full of trouble, comes up like a flower and withers, flees like a shadow, and does not last. Skip to verse 7. There is hope for a tree. If it's cut down, that it will sprout again, and that its shoots will not cease. Though its root grows old in the earth, and its stump dies in the ground, yet at the scent of water it will bud, and put forth branches like a young plant. But mortals, humans, die, and are laid low. Humans expire. And where are they? This is real wisdom, you see. This ancient poet, whose name we do not know, is very bright. We're sort of like trees, and we're not much like trees. Trees can regenerate. Trees can send up new shoots of life when they seem to be completely dead. Not humans. We die, and we really are dead. You know, the word expire in Hebrew has to do with the breath running out. I know I've told you this story. I'm going to tell it again. When I was going through seminary, Jessica Mitford's book was very popular, called The American Way of Death. She sold lots of copies, at least to seminary students all over the country, because she was saying we gussy up the body, and we put a lot of makeup, and we put them in their finest dress or suit, and we put the best face on death we can, instead of helping people understand how real death is. And so when I was in seminary, we were taught to say very clearly, he died, she died, he died, she died, he died. Don't use any of these other expressions. He died, she died. When I was at Beaumont, pastor there, we had our very first intern that I had from the School of Theology. Bill Gandon was his name. He's still a pastor down in Texas. Bill Gandon came as our young intern. I wasn't that old myself, so it hadn't been that long since I was in seminary. We had an associate 20 years older than I was, probably, at least. One day, I had made the hospital calls, and I knew we had a man at St. Elizabeth Hospital, at that time run by the same order of nuns that were in charge, basically, of St. Francis here. In fact, the superior, Mother Superior at St. Elizabeth in Beaumont, came to St. Francis here, Sister Blondine. I'd been over there, and I knew that, we had a patient who was very, very ill. And so when this older associate came back from hospital rounds, I happened to be standing in the hall with the young intern telling him something, and I said, "Oh, John, how's Mr. Smith today?" And he said, "Mr. Smith expired." And the young intern said, "No, he didn't. He died." Magazine subscriptions expire. People die. And John looked like, he sort of whacked him between the eyes with a rolled up paper and said, well, yes, I guess that's right. And we all went back to work. A few days later, we had a woman, very ill. I'd seen her the day before. I'm standing in the hall telling the intern something, and John walks in from having made the rounds that day, and I said, "How's Miss Smith?" And he looked at the young intern and said, "Her subscription ran out." True story. If humans expire, their subscriptions run out, where are they? Verse 14. Big important question. If mortals die, will they live again? He doesn't have a good answer for that. Let's skip to verse 15. Chapter 15, sorry. All right. I think I've given you the best of that long speech of Job. That's what I'm trying to do. You can, of course, go back and read it all for yourself. Let's go into chapter 15, because now we have one of the three comforters who wants to get into this again. Then Eliphaz answered, "Should the wise answer with windy knowledge?" I mean, how big a put down is that to Job? They're all tired of his long speeches at this point, and he's tired of theirs as well. But remember, this is a debate going on only in the heart and mind of some poet, And he's trying to argue both sides of this thing. He's trying to help those who will read know that there are two ways of looking at this matter. And he's trying to give you both. But here it's Eliphaz who says, "Should the wise answer with windy knowledge and fill themselves with the east wind?" What comes from the east? What's east of Israel? Saudi Arabia. And what kind of winds come from Saudi Arabia? Hot. So this was an old-fashioned way of saying, you're full of hot air. That's the way we say it today. Job, you're full of hot air. If you fill yourself with the east wind. Verse 4. You're doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Are you the firstborn of the human race? Are you the most important person who's ever lived? Are you the first person this has ever happened to? I mean, how important do you think you are, Job? Verse 9, skip down. What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not clear to us? See, the three are arguing, they're smarter. Job's arguing, he's smarter. They're going back and forth. Skip to verse 12. Why does your heart carry you away? Why do your eyes flash? So that you turn your ruach against God and let such words go out of your mouth? I think that's enough of Eliphaz. Go to chapter 16. Job answered, I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all. I told you sometimes when I go into a hospital room and there's several people visiting, if the person's not, really so sick, I often say, friends or comforters? And usually the patient looks at me as if I've lost my mind. I know they aren't following. And so I say, don't you remember the comforters of Job who came supposedly to bring him comfort, but brought him no comfort at all? So what about this room full of folks you got here? Are they really helping you or not? Have windy words no limit? What provokes you that you keep on talking? Job asked. I also could talk as you do if you were in my place. I could join words together against you and shake my head at you. You remember what was said of Jesus? They wag their heads. They shake their heads at me. It's a quote from Psalm 22. At the time he's being tried and then crucified, beaten and crucified, they wag their heads, they shake their heads. If you were in my situation, Job says, I could shake my head at you too. I could argue just from the top of the head, not from the heart. Verse 7, surely now Elohim has worn me out. He has made desolate all my company. That is, everything I had. It's gone. Skip to verse 11. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, and he broke me in two. The last 2 years, we've had some really good people in Boston Avenue Church who've had some really tough financial times. I was sitting with a man on Thursday who was telling me about how he was trying to follow all the advice of his financial advisor, a dear friend, he said, and a man whom I trusted, and I believe he was acting on the best information he had. And he was telling me to buy Bank America. He was telling me to buy Citigroup. They were paying me generous dividends. My wife and I were comfortable in our retirement. Suddenly, my General Electric, my Bank of America, my Wachovia just plummeted. Some people jump out the window, you see. I was at ease, and he broke me in two. I chair the Board of Pensions and Health Benefits for Oklahoma Conference, our United Methodist ministers and their families. And I can tell you that 2 years ago, we had several clergy who were lined up to go into retirement. And suddenly, the Board of Pensions, based in Evanston, Illinois, they are managing $20 billion, had their stocks plummet 40% like most everybody else. Not only that, but when some of our ministers in the past from Boston Avenue retired, Dr. Emma Richardson, Dr. Virginia Gray, Harold Reynolds, they got annuities paying 8%. 2 years ago, if ministers had retired, their funds have fallen 40%, and they're being offered annuities that pay 4%, not 8%. Suddenly, preachers are begging the bishop, "Don't make me retire. Please don't make me retire. Please." Hey, it happens in lots of different ways. It can be a matter of health. It can be a matter of death. It can be a matter of finances. When you weren't chasing uranium mines or something, you were doing the best you knew how to invest in America's biggest, strongest companies. Verse 14. He bursts upon me again and again. God, he means. He rushes at me like a warrior. I've done everything I know to do, Job is saying. I've sewed sackcloth upon my skin and laid my strength in the dust. He's put ashes on his head, cold ones, showing he's lower than dirt. My face is red with weeping, and deep darkness is on my eyelids, though there is no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure. I've harmed no one. Verse 20. My friends scorn me. My eye pours out tears to God. Verse 22. For when a few years have come, I shall go the way from which I shall not return. I give up, he's saying at that point. Well, I think you can skip chapter 17. It continues in the same vein. Let's go to chapter 18. Then Bildad the third answered, How long will you hunt for words? Now see again, this could imply that we have different authors here taking a shot at this question. They're still hunting for words to try to speak for Job, try to speak against Job. That Job is a good man, yet terrible things have happened to him. Well, maybe he's not so good. Maybe there's something in seemingly good people that we don't know about that causes them finally to pay tough prices. Verse 3 ends, Why are we stupid in your sight? So here you have Job implying that they're not as bright as he is, and then they imply, well, Job's not as bright as they are. Verse 5. Surely the light of the wicked is put out. Okay, and stop and think. Bad things have happened to Job. His light's been put out. So, does that mean he's wicked? That's our observation, Bildad says. The wicked have their lights put out. Look at verse 7, last part. Their own schemes throw them down, for they are thrust into a net by their own feet. Skip to verse 16. Their roots dry up beneath. Now here he's going back to Job's argument about plants in some ways have it better than we do. A tree can die, fall over, even the trunk, and the root seem to be dead. And with just a breath of water, he said, just a breath of dampness, a new sprout, it can grow again. But for people, this Bildad is picking up on Job's argument. The wicked, though, he's not saying you're one of them, Job, but he's definitely saying the wicked have their own schemes, pull them down, their own feet thrust them into the net. And now here, their roots dry up beneath, their branches wither above, their memory perishes from the earth, and they have no name in the street. Simply meaning everybody's forgotten them. Nobody's talking about them. That's what happens to the wicked. So where are you, Job? Let's go to chapter 19. Job answers again. Then Job answered, how long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? You remember that old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me? Forget that. Words do hurt. Your words break me in pieces, Job said. You're not helping me. You're hurting me. Verse 4, even if it is true that I have erred, my error remains with me. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my humiliation an argument against me, know then that God has put me in the wrong. I followed God. That's what he's contending still. I did the best I could to do things God's way. God gave us 10 commandments. They've been expanded. I've done them. I have done them. I have avoided the wrong. I have done the right. So if I put a foot in the wrong direction, hey, God put me there. I've done it his way. Verse 9. He has stripped my glory from me and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I am gone. He has uprooted my hope like a tree. He has kindled. Okay, stop and think. Kindling. Kindling is what one used to build a fire. What is the word for wrath or anger in Hebrew? It has to do with fire in the nose. You see how these words come out in English then? He has kindled his wrath against me and counts me somehow as his adversary. I don't understand how, but he does. Somehow God sees me as his adversary, or he wouldn't have let or caused. The very beginning of this book says God didn't cause, but he offered Job up. He let the accuser, the liar, the cheat, the Satan have his way with Job. It's the only way they know to explain these terrible things that have happened to Job. Okay, look at verse 18. Let's skip to 18. Even young children despise me. When I rise, they talk against me. See, he gets up off this sickbed, this dung heap where he's scratching his sores and moves around, he can hear people whispering about him. All my intimate friends abhor me. Those whom I loved have turned against me. My bones cling to my skin and to my flesh. I've escaped by the skin of my teeth. That is, he's still alive. Have pity on me. Have pity on me, O you, my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. Skip to verse 25. One of my favorite arrangements. I can't do it justice, but I know how the tune goes. I know that my Redeemer liveth. You know that? It comes from right here. Verse 25. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God. Wow, what a statement right there. He's been asking, if I die, will I live again? No. And now comes these verses here, which are either Job's thought has progressed, or maybe we have a different author here. Can't be for sure. Seems to be a very different message, doesn't it? Remember who a Redeemer was? Your footnote says Vindicator is another one. And Vindicator in Latin comes from the same word that we have in invincible, invincible, that which can be harmed and that which cannot be, that which rises above. The word redemption in our word comes from the slave market, I've told you. The slave market, when someone is being auctioned off and the highest bidder comes up and pays the price and then unlocks the shackles and lets the slave walk away free. That's what the word Redeemer means. That's the root of it. I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God. Paul called that the resurrection body. He knew that people who died at sea, whose bodies were dumped at sea, and those who had been burned by Romans like Nero and others, the body was gone. And so Paul talked about a resurrection body. That Jesus was changed in his resurrection. He could now just appear behind locked doors. But he was also the same Jesus. He could eat fish, we're told in the Gospels. He could fix breakfast for the disciples when they went fishing again up at the Sea of Galilee. Changed, but the same. Recognizable, sometimes not so recognizable. And so Paul talked about, before the four Gospels got written, Paul wrote his letters. He was dead before the four Gospels were written. We shall be given a resurrection body that's incorruptible. You've heard Richard Sutcliffe sing that part from Handel's Messiah. It's one of my favorite parts. Joel doesn't put it in every year because it really is not in the Christmas portion of Messiah. You have to go to the Easter portion. You know, the whole Messiah is 4 hours or something. And so we just, Boston Avenues can take an hour of most anything, and then they're ready to go home. So he picks the best hour that he knows how, the best hour. And sometimes, not every year, sometimes he chooses this number that really comes in the Easter portion of Handel's arrangement of the story of Jesus Christ. And when Richard sings with that big, wonderful bass voice of his, when the trumpet shall sound. Gail and I are usually sitting really close to the trumpets because she likes the timpani. Gail was a percussionist herself, and so she appreciates the timpanist who most of the hour just sits there. There are only a couple of the big numbers the timpanist finally gets to perform. Far unto us a child is born, to us a son is given. Timpanist gets to play. And of course, with the Hallelujah chorus, the timpanist gets to play. But right next to the timpani are the trumpeters, the way Joel seats them here. And one of the trumpeters has an instrument called a piccolo trumpet. You band members know what that is, of course. It's only about this long. Shaped like a trumpet, but about this long. And when he plays that thing, and these are guys from the Tulsa Symphony, so they play very well. And when he plays that little trumpet, even over the rest of the orchestra, even over Richard's big, wonderful voice, you can hear it. And, gee, it just sort of moves up your spine. When the trumpet shall sound, we shall be raised incorruptible. Incorruptible. I love it. It's wonderful. Chapter 20. Then Zophar answered, okay, another turn for Zophar here. Pay attention. My thoughts urge me to answer because of the agitation within me. Job, you've got me all stirred up. I can't be quiet. Verse 4, do you not know this from of old, ever since mortals were placed on earth, that the exulting of the wicked is short, and the joy of the godless is but for a moment? Now, what is he saying? People who die young must have been bad. That was the argument. If you die young, poor, sick, you must have been bad. If you live a long time, surrounded at your death by children and grandchildren and lots of cattle and camels, you must have been good. Verse 8, he's still making his pitch that evil people go away. They will fly away like a dream and not be found. Verse 10, their children will seek the favor of the poor, and their hands will give back their wealth. You see, this argument's not right. It's not true. Life would make more sense if that's the way it went. You know, all evil, vile people live a very short time, and everything they have gets taken away from them. But we know some very old people who've been really wicked, mean, hateful all their lives, selfish, who pass on millions to their children and grandchildren. Verse 18, they will give back the fruit of their toil and will not swallow it down. From the profit of their trading, they will get no enjoyment. We know that's not true. Often they get a lot of enjoyment from their trading, for they have crushed and abandoned the poor. They've seized a house that they did not build. Verse 27, the heavens will reveal their iniquity, and the earth will rise up against them. But not every time. Sometimes really vile, evil people live a long time and die very wealthy. So, you see, this is an argument between the three comforters and Job. And I think it's important that we keep hearing some of this. I hope I'm being helpful in trying to lift up some of the most important parts of the argument as I see it. Next Sunday will be October 31, and you and I will begin with chapter 21. If you haven't been to church, don't rush off.